Thanks for joining us for this look at the best original reporting from KPBS News this week. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Coming up, San Diego's child care deserts. KPBS investigates why some local communities have so few options for families. The pandemic money crunch at local hospitals. One major provider details the challenge of providing enough care after the pandemic shook their financial system. And celebrating the 4th, fireworks are not the only displays you'll find this year, as firefighters urge you to leave the show to the professionals. And we start with a nation still reeling from the Supreme Court's decision to let individual states allow or ban abortions. California will vote in November whether to solidify those rights in our state constitution. Alexander Nguyen went to a demonstration in East County this week as emotions run high.
My body, my choice.
Protesters gather at Santee Trolley Station to protest the Supreme Court's decision overturning Roe v. Wade. The protest was organized by Rise Up for Abortion, a grassroots organization of young people fighting for reproductive rights.
I'm very upset that we have to be doing this. It's upsetting that we have to fight against a Supreme Court with two men who have been accused of sexual harassment and rape, and we're here to tell them no more. They're on notice.
Kirsten Hernandez says she's happy to see many young people protesting today. It shows that the younger generation is speaking up. Gabriela Enzevi and her friend Ava Crew are 16-year-old high schoolers. They say they're out here because they say this is a human rights issue.
Well, we have human rights, and we are human at the end of the day, and we should be treated as such.
Earlier in the day, local lawmakers gather at the county administration building to urge for the passage of Senate Constitution Amendment 10, which will codify abortion rights into California's constitution. The bill was introduced by Senate President Pro Tem Tony Atkins.
We will not be shoved back into the dark days of desperate decisions. Abortion is health care, plain and simple, and the decision to have one lies solely with the patient. California will not leave people vulnerable.
The amendment was passed by the Assembly today. It will go in front of voters this November.
My body, my choice.
Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
There's a new face at the Supreme Court. Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson was sworn in on Thursday, and she replaces retiring Justice Stephen Breyer, who served for nearly 30 years. Beyond abortion, the Supreme Court wrapped up its term with rulings on the asylum system and environmental protections in recent days. That's the discussion for this week's KPBS Roundtable. You can listen as a podcast or you can stream the show at kpbs.org. Surprise and disappointment for teens in North County. The firing of a school superintendent is leaving a lot of unanswered questions about how we talk about race. KPBS education reporter MG Perez has more on the dismissal of Cheryl James Ward.
The shock still stings.
I think the argument was made about race because they were trying to label her as a racist.
It's so gridlocked in our school district that anything that supports our voices is just going to take years to accomplish.
Joy Rupert and Ayanna Johnson are 17 years old, friends, incoming high school seniors in the San Diego Union High School District, and strong supporters of their now fired superintendent.
I really think there's a disconnect with our district and our students, and they're just upholding the power at this point. They say they care about student voices, but it definitely does not feel like that right now.
They are the school board trustees who held a special meeting Sunday to hear more public comment on whether to fire Dr. Cheryl James Ward for remarks she made that characterized Asian students in a way that many community members called racist remarks. The board voted unanimously to terminate her without cause. Ward had apologized several times, including a personal apology to Rupert and some of her classmates.
We kind of held our hands in solidarity in that moment and accepted her apology and realized that comments like that are supposed to be had. They're supposed to be discussed and really analyzed in a safe environment.
Rupert is Associated Student Body President at San Diego Academy. Johnson is president of the Black Student Union at Torrey Pines High School.
There's always comments that are going to be made about race. There's always uncomfortable situations, but in order to get past those, you need to have those conversations. You need to have those uncomfortable situations.
These young leaders are very aware of the need for equality in their schools, and they are also aware of a white majority of board trustees.
It's just crazy and disheartening for students of color to see how a Black woman and a woman of color is in power and then just gets completely stripped and torn down.
There will be no further comment from San Dieguito Union School Board members. In their Sunday night press release, they simply wish Dr. Ward the best in her future endeavors. Meanwhile, Ward's attorney says she will sue the district for wrongful termination. Her young supporters still have hope.
It's definitely a struggle, but I think the strongest people get through it and they see the most growth.
MG Perez, KPBS News.
Throughout the pandemic, KPBS has reported on the child care shortage, but some parts of San Diego are struggling more than others. Investigative reporter Claire Tregesser tells us how it's created more child care deserts in our area.
14-month-old Callan Terlecki has a lot to say. Normal for a toddler, but not for his mom's work meetings.
And so it's kind of like scramble and find backup for taking care of my son while I finish up the workday while she goes to do that. I mean, if he was in daycare, it would be consistent. I'd drop him off and pick him up.
But he's not in daycare because all the slots in his rural North County town, Fallbrook, are taken.
We are on like 5 wait lists. It stretches from here in Fallbrook down to Oceanside. Everybody is booked.
Terlecki and other Fallbrook parents are living in the biggest childcare desert in the county. There's just one licensed childcare slot for every 4 kids under age 5 in their region, according to data from the San Diego YMCA.
And not just in Fallbrook, it's Bonsall, Oceanside, Vista, Temecula. Like, you might get lucky to get something in Temecula, but that's, a 30-minute drive from here.
The need for childcare is dire everywhere. Staffing shortages, rising costs, and COVID forced many of these childcare businesses to close. Added challenges make the situation even worse in the Fallbrook region.
A lot of the buildings are older, and so sometimes they don't meet the regulations for licensing.
Nikki Bowles owns one of the few preschools in the area. At least 7 other childcare centers closed during COVID, according to state licensing data.
Their providers were older and didn't want to risk, or had caught COVID and didn't want to risk exposing other people. But because they were older, they decided to retire.
The Fallbrook region's proximity to Camp Pendleton means lots of families with young kids live there, and those kids might not get into military childcare. The population of kids under 5 has grown 16% in the last 10 years, far outpacing overall population growth, and supply hasn't kept up with demand. Bowles is about to add 24 more slots specifically for infants.
I haven't advertised. I haven't done anything. I've had people coming by and stopping and asking about the infant care and when it's going to open. So I have 20 families on a waiting list.
I just kind of became aware of the need, kind of been talking to parents of, quality childcare in the area.
Another Fallbrook resident, Dennis Ashworth, recently retired and during COVID decided to open a home childcare with his wife.
Right now we have 3 children under 2 and 3 children over 2. The phone's been ringing off the hook about moms with really young children looking for daycare.
The state currently has funding to help providers like the Ashworths get their childcare license, says Lori Hahn with the YMCA's Child Care Resource and Referral Program.
Helping them open their license for the first time or expand their license to a large license. Also, if they want to expand to non-traditional hours or to change the children they care for to include infants and toddlers.
If you're happy and clap your hands.
Ashworth just expanded his license to take in more kids. He says he's glad to use his energy and his Fallbrook home to help families in his village.
If we weren't doing this, what would I be doing? Just sitting around and getting older. So I think it does keep you young, and it's kind of exciting every morning when the parents pull up with the kids, and you chit chat with them, and the kids are always excited. So it's a good thing.
But he knows adding a few more spaces at his home does little to change Fallbrook's status as a childcare desert. Claire Tregeser, KPBS News.
And here are some of the most read stories this week at kpbs.org. Later start times for teens. A new California law takes effect, making sure high schools don't start before 8:30 a.m. A Russian superyacht is docked in San Diego, seized under sanctions brought on by the war in Ukraine. And in a case that goes back nearly a decade, 4 of 5 Navy officers charged in a corruption case were found guilty by jurors this week. It's a relatively small art exhibit, but it's drawing a big response in North County, so much that critics wanted depictions of police officers as pigs removed. KPBS reporter Tanya Thorne tells us why it's staying put.
The Street Legacy SoCal Style Masters exhibition opened over the weekend in the California Center for the Arts in Escondido. The exhibition showcases artwork from nearly 100 artists that represent the diverse cultural landscape of Southern California. But one piece has made headlines, and it is the first installation visitors see when they walk into the art center. The piece is called 3 Slick Pigs by a Los Angeles-based artist who goes by OG Slick. The portrayal of the 3 pigs in police uniforms drew criticism from the Escondido City Council and Escondido's outgoing chief of police.
This is a somewhat unusual exhibition because it is about street art. We wanted it to be as authentic as we could make it.
Sarah Mata is the chair of the Board of Trustees for the Art Center. She was part of a special meeting that was held today to determine whether the piece would be removed or changed.
We did decide that we are reaffirming our commitment to this wonderful exhibition and seeing it as an opportunity for us to be more proactive about encouraging dialogue in the light of some of the public comments.
She says public comments over the exhibit were considered in the decision to not make any changes to the show, and that the decision aligns with the Art Center's support of the First Amendment.
We take very seriously our role as an arts organization. There are standards for how we should operate, and one basic one obviously is First Amendment and freedom of speech. We live by that.
Isaac Ruiz was at the center today awaiting the decision. His dad, Bobby Ruiz, is one of the 2 curators for the exhibition. Ruiz said they were expecting the piece to be taken down, but is glad the decision went the other way.
I think people were expecting it to be pulled just because of the power that people have. They think they have that privilege. Like, okay, I have this privilege, I have this power. Like, of course it's getting pulled. But no, I think they're wrong. And if you were here Saturday in the opening, it was all love. It's still all love.
The Street Legacy SoCal Style Masters exhibition will run until August 28th. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
After a couple of years of home prices that kept going up, we're starting to see something we haven't seen in a while. John Carroll takes a closer look at what's changed in the local housing market and why prices might have peaked.
In March, home prices in the San Diego metro region were up 29.6% over March of 2021, an 18-year high. But the Case-Shiller Index, which tracks housing, says they were only up 28.5% in April, still sky high, but a move in the opposite direction is notable, and the main driver behind it, says Scott Evans of Cross Country Mortgage, is mortgages.
I would say that's probably the biggest impact with the slowdown is the rise in interest rates, hands down. I mean, pretty much 90%.
So what do mortgage rates now do to the monthly payment on, say, a $500,000 home in San Diego? Yes, a rarity, but just for comparison's sake.
Just doing 20% down, just to get an idea. So a $400,000 loan, the payment is about $3,000. 6 months ago, it was probably about $700 less.
Really, it's going back to what it was before the pandemic.
Jeremy Gabe is an assistant professor of real estate at the University of San Diego. He says a big effect of rising mortgage rates is keeping people in their homes. That in turn lowers inventory.
Most people who own their houses now have mortgages that are fixed at rates lower than the prevailing interest rate. And so that makes them less likely to move up the housing ladder, move sideways on the housing ladder.
Gabe says the higher interest rates won't have much effect on people in mid to upper income levels. It will be those on the lower end that will be priced out.
Say South County, you might see the downward pressure caused by lesser demand in the market being driven by interest rate rises to offset that lack of inventory. In the rest of the market, where interest rates are not going to be as big an effect, housing will probably track inflation.
Glass half empty? It's now much more difficult for lower income folks to get into the housing market. Half full? We're really just back to where we were before the pandemic and nowhere near where we were in the 1980s when interest rates were in the double digits. John Carroll, KPBS News.
There's also a money crunch for local hospitals that had their finances rattled by the pandemic. KPBS health reporter Matt Hoffman talked with one major provider that expects more challenges ahead.
More than half of the state's hospitals are operating at a loss or unsustainable margins because of the COVID-19 pandemic. That's according to a recent report commissioned by the California Hospital Association.
That means they are losing money every day caring for patients.
Jan Emerson Shea is Vice President of External Affairs for the California Hospital Association. She says more hospitals are losing money now compared to pre-pandemic.
It's probably going to take years for the situation to fully right itself. And in truth, there may be hospitals across the state that just aren't able to come out of this.
Inflation is only worsening the financial strain on hospitals. The report found that hospitals are generally caring for fewer patients, while costs are rising and labor shortages are growing. Hospitals have been turning to contract workers. It's an expense that's hurting their bottom line. Some travel nurses are being paid upwards of $300 an hour.
And California is not alone in this, so we're in a national bidding war, if you will, for these temporary workers.
Scripps Health is one of the largest hospital systems in San Diego. Its CEO, Chris Van Gorder, says Scripps has paid as much as $211 per hour for contract nurses. He says they currently have around 1,000 open positions.
And we're talking about everything from nurses to environmental service workers to food service workers.
Van Gorder says the worker shortage and rising expenses is taking a major bite out of the healthcare system's profits.
We're seeing supply costs going up about 5 to 6%, but our revenue growth at best is going to go up about 3%. So these very small margins you're seeing hospitals make right now are going to get even tighter in the next couple of years.
There's also another financial cloud hanging over hospitals. The Seismic Safety Act was amended 20 years ago. It requires hospitals to be retrofitted to operate after earthquakes. It has a fast approaching deadline of 2030.
That has a $100+ billion price tag associated with it. We're running into a train wreck if something isn't done to relieve the pressure on the seismic issue.
Emerson Shea hopes hospitals get a deadline extension.
There's probably not enough money in the state to pay for all of the seismic requirements, but we may need at some point to have a conversation about at least some dollars being allocated. But right now, time doesn't cost anything, and it could be an enormous help.
Over at Scripps, Van Gorder is budgeting for the seismic retrofitting mandate, something that could increase with the cost of raw materials.
We're hoping to get a delay on that, but the legislature is struggling with that. That's $2.4 billion for Scripps. Legislators will look at the balance sheet and go, well, why? You look at all that money you have in the bank. Well, I can tell you, if we spent all the money we have in the bank right now, I would not be able to comply with SB 1953.
Van Gorder says hospitals, including Scripps, got federal COVID relief money from the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan, but he says that money is gone. He'd like to see some more help from the state or federal government.
We're lucky in San Diego. We've got good healthcare systems. We've got good, strong healthcare systems. I'm not saying Scripps is not in danger of closing. We have a balance sheet that can support us. But when you look forward to all these challenges that I have to deal with, and particularly the unfunded mandates, the $2.4 billion in building costs that I have to do because the state says I have to do it, Other states don't have that problem.
While Scripps or other San Diego systems may not be at risk of closing, the Hospital Association says it's a very real threat for others. They were lobbying for increases in Medi-Cal reimbursements to try and help struggling hospitals, but ultimately they weren't able to get it in the state budget. California is allocating money for health worker education and training. There's also $1 billion in stipends to help retain staff. Again, here's Emerson Shea.
We need all hospitals in this state. We have roughly 400 hospitals in California to treat 40 million people in our state. We cannot afford to lose these very important centers of care.
Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
We hope that you're enjoying your 4th of July weekend. There are plenty of events to celebrate the holiday, including the return of most fireworks shows. Jacob Ayer wraps up what's back and what's new for 2022.
There will be no shortage of fireworks to see this Independence Day across San Diego. The Big Bay Boom is back, and so are many other firework events across the county.
If they want to see fireworks, please go to one of the shows. They're all over the county on the 4th of July. It's a safe way to go visit, spend time with your family.
The holiday doesn't come without its fire risks, says San Diego Cal Fire's Neil Chapinski.
This time of year down here in San Diego, like we like to say, is usually in a year-round fire season, and we are in heightened. We just had a real hot week last week, dried things out, and we did have some fires down on the border and up over around the county. So the danger is always there.
Fireworks of any kind, including even small firecrackers, are commonplace but illegal in the city and county of San Diego.
In San Diego County specifically, all fireworks are illegal. So any of the ones that you do see are actually not supposed to be happening unless it's at a registered show.
One company looking to change the traditional fireworks celebrations is teaming up with the city of Imperial Beach for a high-tech drone show. It'll be staged from the pier and synchronized to music with dozens of drones lighting the sky.
There's even a new drone show down in Imperial Beach that doesn't have any fireworks. You don't have to listen to any of the noise if that's a concern for you or your pets or maybe some of your younger family members.
Notably, Ocean Beach's annual 4th of July fireworks celebration off the pier will not be happening for the 3rd year in a row, nor will the fireworks at Camp Pendleton or at Mira Mesa High School. Jacob Ayer, KPBS News.
Also in Imperial Beach, some progress for a problem that's been around for decades. The big fix for the cross-border sewage problem is still years away, but KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson says some smaller projects are already having a positive impact.
We'll dig all this up. When Morgan Rogers surveys the concrete-lined Tijuana River channel as it crosses the international border, he sees progress.
This is the lined portion of the channel where it transitions to the natural. And this is a good viewpoint. You can see that all the sediment that has accumulated, this is from the wet season.
Rogers is a civil engineer in charge of pollution control on the U.S. side of the border. This concrete channel is a conduit for pollution that fouls the ocean just a few miles away.
So you can see when it rains, we get rainwater, it carries a lot of sediment, a lot of trash. So you'll see a lot of tires here.
But when it's not raining, most sewage-tainted flows can be stopped by a relatively low-tech solution.
What we have here is a sediment berm. This is constructed with the sediment that was deposited on the concrete line channel. This is constructed and maintained by Mexico. We provide the equipment, in particular a wheeled loader and whatever else they need to facilitate their constructing the berm and maintaining it.
Look over the sediment wall and there's standing water. A few hundred yards north, a Mexican pump station pulls most of that water out of the river channel.
During the dry season, this is very effective for preventing flows from coming down the river and crossing the border into the United States.
And there are other small success stories. Rogers takes us to a culvert just north of the border wall. Look through the fence here, and you can see cars zipping by on a Mexican highway.
This is Stewart's Drain, one of our 5 canyon collectors.
Crews recently fixed an underground gate here that was locked in place, creating pressure when sewage flows under the border wall were heavy. With the gate now fully open, flows are easier to manage. There is a trickle of water coming through the drain on this day, but it's hardly an issue.
So this isn't something I would worry about. I mean, we want to eliminate all flows, but we're handling this one.
The progress by the International Boundary and Water Commission has been noticed and is welcome.
I'm very happy with
what I call the micro fixes that the IBWC has made, micro fixes that can stop flows that can result in weeks of closures.
Serge Dedina is the mayor of Imperial Beach. He says stopping the flow of sewage through the Tijuana estuary helps, but those micro fixes don't solve the border pollution problem. His city's beaches have been posted as polluted for much of the summer because of a broken Mexican sewage treatment plant.
They discharge 30 to 50 million gallons of raw sewage on the beach every day between, I think it's 4.5 to 6 miles south of the border. And during south swell and south wind that comes up to Imperial Beach, as well as all the other discharge sites from Playas southward to Rosarito.
That's one reason the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency is pushing for a comprehensive solution, which includes projects on both sides of the U.S.-Mexico border. Officials hope to capture and treat sewage-tainted flows that cross the border on land and build a treatment plant that works south of the border. But it'll still be a couple of years before any major sewage treatment plants start to be built.
It's not fast enough, but it is a priority for us.
Nora Vargas is the vice chair of the County Board of Supervisors. She says it's important to remember that a fix is coming for communities that have long endured the public health crisis. She says focusing on pollution postings at South County beaches during the dry summer month shouldn't become a distraction.
Let's not villainize the test. Let's not make it about businesses or community. Let's make it about our communities being safe and healthy so that everybody can enjoy the beauty of our beaches in Southern California and in the South Bay.
The hope is that with all these small projects already underway and the big projects that are on the drawing board, they'll keep sewage-tainted flows out of this river valley, which will in turn keep those sewage-tainted flows out of the ocean. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
And a reminder, all of our content can be found at the KPBS YouTube page. In addition to our reporter stories, you can also live stream KPBS Evening Edition weeknights at 5. We hope that you enjoyed this look at KPBS News this week. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Thanks for joining us.